de Caicedo looking for the ball. Golazo. Goal!
Welcome back to Jamaican Fan, and well, guys, reggaeboyz can pack their bags. They're officially out of the Copa America, and I got 3 takeaways from their match against Ecuador to tell you how it basically happened. So without further ado, without wasting any more time, let's get straight through it. And I'll start with the first point. I call it you create your own luck. The system looks more like a 3-4-1-2 with Bobby Reed sitting at number 10 with Antonio and Nicholson again partnering up front, Lee, Palmer, Lowe and Lambikisa in that midfield behind Bobby Reed, and then Pinot, Latibor there and Bernard at centre back. So that was supposed to go up against an Ecuador team that was playing in a 4-2-3-1, and I only assume the fact that Lowe is in the team is some pressure off Palmer and Reed on the defensive side. As I stated, they look uncomfortable playing that box-to-box in the last game, as well as to outnumber the Ecuadorians in that midfield. But when the whistle blew, we saw something that was closely akin to what we saw in the Mexico game. It was simply looking nervous on the ball immediately, and Ecuadorians smelled blood in the water, and they start to immediately press and run us down every time a yellow shirt touched the ball. That caused us to already went into box shape of 5. It just seemed that we already lost the will to fight before the bell was rung. We got the first warning shot that the Ecuadorians were not playing around when Lembikisa got the ball at the wide wing back spot, and he tried his best to look for a pass but had to cut in and cough up the ball, and saw the ball immediately turn over to their wonder kid Paez, who, thanks to Wade coming to pressure him, he lifted the ball over the bar. It should have been a goal for the Ecuadorians early, but it came about from Jamaica's own doing. Let me pause the video right here and show you what I'm talking about. As you can see, despite there being 5 men in that midfield, despite us outnumbering the Ecuadorians, there were wide gaps between one yellow shirt to the other. As you can see in this picture here, the next closest yellow shirt was miles away. It was just amazing that there's so much gap between players. It just showed the nervous mentality that the players already had, where they were not willing to really come closer for the ball each time one of their teammates had it. We were just not up for it, and Ecuadorians were already 100 miles ahead. They basically did what the Mexicans did in the first game. They chipped away at our back 5 by taking the ball out wide, but instead of knocking back to the top of the like the Mexicans did, the Ecuadorians had no problem trying to get that ball into that space between the penalty spot and the 6-yard box. Our centre backs did manage to repel it, but only just, as waves and waves of Ecuadorian attackers coming down those flanks. What's even better is that these Ecuadorian wingers were much more technical on the ball compared to their Mexican counterpart, and even if we double up against Ecuadorian, they always seem that there's a moment they wiggle through. It was tough going for the Jamaicans, but at least they could argue that despite it all, we never exactly coughed up any real chance apart from that early one by Paez. But football is a funny thing, and sometimes you're just really lucky, or they will tell you that you create your own luck, as the Ecuadorian goal came out of a very big slice of deflection and slice of luck. Sacramento got past the back line, but Palmer, doing the hard work he has been doing from the first game, came in to try to provide cover, but by the time he reached and the cross was set off, the only managed to get a toe on it that made the ball deviate in the air enough for it to bamboozle Wade in goal, and it flies over his head into the back of the net. A good goal for Ecuador, and sure, it felt like the straight ball luck for the Jamaicans, but sometimes in football, you just create your own luck, and based on the run of play, you could argue that it was coming. 1-0. After that, the Ecuadorians, took a bit of the foot off the gas at that point, probably to give their hard-running midfielders and strikers some rest, and we got more and more into the game and more on the ball. It did build our confidence somewhat, and we were not able to push the line more forward. Bobby Reed himself was getting more and more on the ball, and the wing-backs were, as usual, were much more forward. It did lead to our first shot on target, again from Bobby Reed, but it only came from far out, and that was basically after the 30th minute, but it just showed how far behind we were in the fight. We did provide a good spell of pressure after that, after a barrage of long throws and corners, and while we were hoping to do something early, again Ecuadorians did well to repel it all. We weren't getting much luck, and the Ecuadorians decided to break time was over, and once again they're dominating the ball and in between the lines. They were stringing some good zippy passes around us, and Lowe himself was a raging bull, charging everywhere he can, but was always late to every ball and always late to every man. But we still weren't coughing up any clear-cut chances as the clock ticked down to the halftime. We're really hoping that we'd have seen it out. But again, luck in football is a crazy thing. When the ball came over in the box early and Pinnock missed the header, the Ecuadorians was able to head the ball at goal, but saw it deviate out for a corner. While they and everybody that started, there wasn't much in it, the worst three-letter word that no player likes to hear, VAR, came up and asked the referee to review it. So the referee, who spent eternity to review what was happening here, eventually gave the penalty, and now Ecuadorians had a chance to go 2-up. Again, looking at the review itself, it could be honestly seen as harsh. It could be seen as unlucky for us because the header came very close to the player, and you could argue he wouldn't have much time to really react. But the rules are nowadays, which honestly feel like they change all the time. They do mention that if your hands are outside the natural silhouette of the body, it will be deemed as an offense. So up to the penalty spot they go, and they gave their wonder kid Paez to right the wrong for his miss in the first half, and that he did when he got past weight into the goal. 2-0, I could say it was deserved. No, a lot of people will be saying that this was the coach's fault. He set them up technically wrong with his formation or tactics, and there might be some merit in that, but honestly I felt it was more of an issue of mentality, which of course you could blame the coaches for as well. The way they were playing, the way they were slow to every ball, the way they lost to every duels, the way they were so afraid to really get onto the ball, to move into space, it felt like they are the size of the Ecuadorians as world beaters, and they had no chance. We will get into overall stats of the game later, but I have to basically show what I mean in terms of the first half. Look at these stats, people. In the first half, only the Ecuadorians had 54% of possession compared to our 46%. But the bigger thing I want you to look at is that they attempted 154 passes, made 80% of those, and had 68 of those in the opposition half. While Jamaica had 131 passes, they only had a 71% accuracy, and they had 61 of those passes in their own half. But the real message in these stats lied in terms of the defensive side. Tackles won. The Jamaicans only managed to win 3 tackles in that first half, which was 27% of their tackles attempted. This was because literally the Ecuadorians was bouncing the ball around us, and we just could not lay a glove on them. We only made 3 interceptions. We had 6 blocks compared to 0 from them, and we had 13 clearances and 1 key saves. We only had 37% of our duels won, 41% of our ground duels won, and 20% of our aerial duels won. And we were much taller and physical than they are. And just to show you how much they swarm us anytime we touch the ball, we only had 1 successful dribble in the entire half. Stats aren't everything, but these clearly reflect how poor and how dominated we were in that first half. And I didn't think at that point that there could be any real change or tactics could help us. Honestly, I just felt that the players just had to step up their game and try their best to do much better than they were. Alright, point number 2, the right mentality. Alright, so we did go into the half 2-0 down, and to be honest to you guys, if it wasn't for me covering this game for you guys on the channel here, I would have already turned off the TV and went to early bed. But I persisted and into the second half, and I have to give the players and the coach himself a little bit of credit, because just like the Mexico game, we came out a bit more swinging in the second half. It's as if we finally got life and wake up to this competition. We're now trying to keep possession much better. We were now seeing players, especially Bobby Reid, come to his centre box to take the ball for them to try start the plays. And we see our wing backs much higher and wasn't too much worried about the space behind. The coach did make 2 changes at halftime. We saw Gray came into the game despite him not starting, and we also saw Hector replace the banana once again. Lowe was out, and because of that, Bobby Reid was now back into that deeper role, and he, with the armband, and he seemed that he was going to lead the team to prosperity. Him and Palmer were now playing as if they had a lease on life, and they were now finding the feet of Nicholson and Gray and Antonio much better. The Ecuadorians were clearly taken aback by this. They thought we were down and out, and because the line was pushed up a bit higher and the players them now were trying to move the ball quicker, we were now squeezing the Ecuadorians in their own half. But it seemed similar to the Mexico game, and what we needed was a goal to really slam home the advantage. And it finally came, this time off a well-earned corner. The ball came into the box, and after some fumbling around, it fell at the feet to Pinnock, who tried his best to put it on target, and again it bobbled around and fall on the feet at Antonio, who swiveled and turned and got the ball into the goal. Our first goal at COPA, and I'm especially happy for Antonio himself, who worked so hard in their first game and deserved a goal. So good to see him here. So momentum was definitely on our side. We're no pinning the Ecuadorians back. No seemed like the flustered one. When pressed, they were coughing up the ball just like we did in the first half. And all of a sudden, the world beat us like papas. It makes you wonder if only we started the game with such a mentality. What's even more interesting is that we did switch formation to a bit more that looks a bit more like a 4-4-2 or a 4-3-3, as we were pushing most of our midfielders as high as possible to help out our wingers and attackers. Shamar Nicholson, who basically ghosted through the first half, even had a bit more of a spark in the second half because he had more yellow shirt to help him. He did better to hold the ball at some times and even did his best to find Gray or Lee in behind. But credit must be given to Latibadir, Palmer and Reed. They're the one that kept the press much higher up the line, and they also tried to pass the ball much quicker. It even led to one of the chances as the Ecuadorians were pressed and coughed up the ball in their own final third, and the ball landed at Palmer's feet, who looked up quick and finding somebody from midfield finally running behind the line. We have not seen that in some game, and it was Bobby Reed who the ball was stroked over to him, and he did the right thing to lay it off to one of his centre forwards, in this case Boza, who rushed his shot and miskicked it, and it went outside danger for Ecuador. I was one of the first that criticized Boza in that first game, and he largely was missing in this game, but that was a big chance for him to redeem himself. After that moment, you could see the Jamaicans were now running out of steam. You could see that the tire legs were now coming. Lemmy Kisa himself looked like a shadow of himself in this game, and especially in that second half, our legs were time to go. The Ecuadorians found a second win, or now trying to play more direct balls to get some of their speedy wingers. And I have to give respect to Hector, who is not the fastest, but with good smart positioning, he did well to keep us in the game with some good one-on-one defending. But I felt this is where, again, coach makes a trick. With our early momentum dying, it was time for some fresh legs. But we saw no substitution made. I felt this was a time for Dixon or Cephas to come in to try freshen up our attack, especially with Bowser there laboring about. But the coach sat on his hands, which is a shame really, because at this point the game was stretched. We were now sending men forward and not caring what's going on at the back, and because of that the Ecuadorians were trying their best to counter us often as they could. But it left gaps and spaces for us to exploit. It's just that we had tired legs in return. And then a bit of controversy happened again down the same side of the field. The ball bounced out to Hector, who was trying to get the ball back to the top of his D, but the Ecuadorian hand and head got in the way and he stopped the play. Of course we appeal, and of course the referee never necessarily budged, and VAR for once seemed to come on our side. The VAR told the referee to look on the monitor, and you could clearly see the ball hitting the hand before you hitting the head first, and everybody in the stadium and in commentary thought it was going to be an easy shout for penalty. But to our surprise, the man in blue said, hey, there ain't no penalty, and I felt it was an absolutely disgraceful call, especially after he gave one that is very similar in the first half in favor of the Ecuadorians. You could argue that it was not a penalty, or it was a penalty based on the proximity between the kicking of the ball and the hand, but I felt if you're going to give the one that's similar in the first half to the Ecuadorians, you have to be consistent and give that one as well. So unfortunately we felt like we were robbed, and from there the Ecuadorians were now utilizing some dark arts. Anytime they go in any tackle, they're the one that will be dropping like flies, rolling around and sucking up pressure and time on the ground, and they did all that to break up any momentum we were trying to create. They even made substitutions that took forever to complete, as players took eternity to get off the pitch, and it was all working well to frustrate and annoy the Jamaican players. At the 81st minute, the coach finally blinked and decided to bring on Cephas and Dixon to finally give us some fresh legs up the pitch. But to be honest, it was a little bit too late, and while they tried to do something in the game, it was too little too late, honestly, and they wouldn't really get no footing on the field. But again, credit to the players, they kept fighting. We went for all we could to get back in the game. We got another corner towards the end, and while we seeked out Pinnock at the back post, he tried to find his teammates at the top of the D that led to a turnover, and with so much players up the field, the Ecuadorians were off to the races. And unfortunately, after some youthful inexperience by Dixon, who decided to go to ground too early, Mina was able to skip over him like a hurdle and got into the box and finished off his shot. But in the end, the game finished right then and there, 3-1 to the Ecuadorians. And again, despite a good second half, again, it felt like a missed opportunity. Point number 3, where we go from here. So yeah, basically, we are knocked out of the competition at this point. And a lot of fans are really not happy. Some of my colleagues in YouTube are especially not happy with the coach right now, and some of the criticisms are definitely merited. I want you to listen to this excerpt from his press conference.
So 2-0 half-time. We had nothing to lose, so we went all in.
As you can hear, he said about that second half, we literally had nothing to lose and we went for it. We played some of our best football under Coach Grimmy in that second half, and we tried to do our best to get back in it. But it all came from our freeing of the shackles for our players, as well as freeing the stress of wearing too much of our defensive shape and what is going on as a defensive unit. So you have to question the coach now, who knew that we had to win this game to stay alive in the competition, while the guys weren't playing with that kind of mentality from the first half. I am not saying us to go for broke and leave one player back at the half line, but you have to instill in these players a bit of freedom to go express themselves, because we definitely need to win, and we can't necessarily worry too much of not losing the game, because even with a point, surviving this tournament would have been very difficult. So you'd love to see the way they played that second half to play that way in the first half, because to be honest, the Ecuadorians, just like the Mexicans, I felt they were there for the taking. The Ecuadorians were criticized heavily for that loss against the Venezuelans, not because of the early record, but mostly because of the fact that after they took the lead, they were under a bit of pressure from the Venezuelans and they crumbled. This is a very, very skilled Ecuadorian team, yes, but they're also a very young team. And without their captain there on the pitch, you could see in that early part of the second half, they were now flustered, especially after the Antonio goal, and they were there for the taking once more. So we should have started the game with the right positive mentality and get into their faces, and you might have seen a better result for us throughout the whole entire game. But we paid too much respect to them, and we paid the price. They were able to express themselves, and with their technical abilities surpassing us, they basically manhandle us like babies. So it is clear that the coach have to take the blame here, not necessarily for his tactics or lineup, but basically just not preparing the team well. The fact that he was able to get them fighting in the second half for 2 matches now show that there's some disconnect in terms of preparation. We got to start the games then more on the front foot and the belief that we can take it to them. So I won't go as far to say he needs to pack his bags and go back to Iceland tonight, but you hope that he definitely learned his lesson from this and allow his players a bit more freedom to express himself. Defense can only get you so far. We need to put the ball in the back of the net more often. So that's on you, coach. You got to get it done. I can't keep the angry mob away from you much longer. But alright guys, that would do it for my 3 key takeaways for the game. Let me go straight into what FootMob say were our best players as usual. And honestly, I'm only going to look at 2 players this time, because it wasn't necessarily a great shining game for us. According to football, our best player on the pitch tonight was Mikel Antonio and Bobby Reid. So they both got a 7.2 rating. They start with Mikel Antonio. I felt it was another good game from him. He wasn't necessarily as busy as he was in that first game, but he still got his weight around. He had a tough first half like the entire team, but he did more work in that second half. And even better, he got the most important goal. So let's look on the stats. As I said, he had 34 touches. He only had 1 touch in the opposition box, which was the goal. So you can see that even despite our second half dominance, we were still not finding Antonio enough in the box. But let's move on quickly to who I thought was our best player tonight, and it was Bobby Reid. He really led as a captain in that second half. He was backed up by the stats that he had 62 touches, 2 out of 4 successful dribbles. He had 7 passes in the final third. 6 of those came in the second half. 1 out of 3 accurate crosses, only 1 out of 3 long balls. What is also especially that he throws his weight around. He has 4 interceptions and 3 recoveries. So he definitely was trying all he can in that second half to push us past the line. So I have to give major kudos to Bobby Reid. Alright, as tradition, we look at our worst player, and a player that I rated highly in the last game and believe he had so much more to offer. So Dexter Lembikisa had probably arguably his worst game for Jamaica. He showed that life can come at you very fast, because despite his great form, he pulled off a stinker. He played 88 minutes, he had 17 out of 23 accurate passes, he only had 44 touches on the ball, 2 touches in the opposition box, but in terms of the defensive side, he won absolutely 0 of his tackles. He only had 1 clearance, 2 recoveries, and he was dribbled past 1 time. So it wasn't the worst performance I've ever seen from a player, but you could clearly see at Dexter's case that he was simply overloaded. Alright, quickly, the overall stats of the game now. As stated before, the Ecuadorians dominated the first half, but in the overall game, the Jamaicans brought it back because of their second half performance. We had 55% possession compared to their 44. They had more, of course, expected goals. They had 2.34 compared to our 0.79. They had 23 total shots overall, 3 big chances, and of course they made 3 shots on target. While the Jamaicans had 7 total shots overall, 2 big chances created, 1 big chance missed, and we only managed 4 shots on target. So we outshot them on target, but as you can see from those expected goals, those are definitely not clear sub chances. So you could say overall, the results might have made sense. We were drastically below par in that first half, and while we stepped up and matched them in that second half, it was too little too late. Again, it just seemed that it was down to the mentality. We have to believe we are good at these teams, especially since their next game against Venezuela is coming up and we're already out of the competition. So I would love to see the coach give the guys more license and more freedom to play the way they want to play and not too worried about the defensive setup. Let us try and get our first point in Copa since we have gotten our first goal. Alright guys, before I run out of here, let's check on Venezuela. Like stated, they played Mexico, of course, in the late game in the group, and they ran out a 1-0 victory. It was a game of penalties. Venezuela got theirs and scored by veteran Rondon, while the Mexicans got theirs and managed to miss it. So in terms of the table, Venezuela surprisingly are already through to the quarterfinal. They lead the table, of course, with 6 points after 2 games played. Currently, Ecuador occupies the spot behind them with 3 points. Of course, the Jamaicans are at the basement with 0 points. So as stated before, our next game is against Venezuela. Let us cheer the boys on one more time in the competition and let us see if they can get us our first victory in Copa America. But alright guys, that's it. We'll do it here for this review. Once again, thank you for watching. And if you're new here, please like, subscribe, and share. And we keep you up to date with one more game in the Copa America on the reggaeboyz. But if you want to look back on how I thought on how we did against the Mexicans, here's a review of that game right here. Otherwise, keep it locked right here at Jump Fun. YouTube, big up yourself.